No genre loves a sequel quite like horror, because if audiences love a horror movie, studios naturally want to just do the same thing all over again and print some more money. And generally speaking, most horror franchises will simply keep bringing the central villain back again and again via supernatural nonsense. It's a fundamentally daft but widely accepted formula. Yet every so often, a horror sequel might dare to do something different, by dusting the villain off, but having them perform a face turn and operate in a more heroic capacity this time around. So with that in mind, I'm Ellie for What Culture, and here are 10 horror movie villains who switched sides in the sequel. Number 10, The Red Queen, Resident Evil, The Final Chapter. In Paul W.S. Anderson's original Resident Evil film, the Red Queen is a murderous artificial intelligence who kills everyone inside the Umbrella Corporation's facility, the Hive, when the T-virus is unleashed within it. The Red Queen is a major roadblock to the survival of Alice and her comrades throughout the movie, famously activating a laser defense grid which wipes out the majority of the soldiers accompanying her. The Red Queen subsequently returned in the series' concluding entry, Resident Evil: The Final Chapter, and though Albert Wesker claimed at the end of the prior movie, Retribution, that she was attempting to wipe out all of humanity, it turned out to be a damn dirty lie. In actuality, the Red Queen ends up teaming up with Alice to take down Umbrella and prevent the human race from being rendered extinct. She even gets to kill Wesker for good measure, while the movie also assures the audience that she only killed everyone in the Hive in the first film to prevent the T-virus from getting out and causing a global catastrophe. Hashtag the Red Queen did nothing wrong. Number 9, Laurie, Happy Death Day to You. Okay, so this one is a teensy bit of a cheat considering that it involves multiversal nonsense. All the same though, in the first Happy Death Day, the cherub-masked babyface killer is revealed to be Laurie, protagonist Tree's jealous roommate, who Tree eventually kicks out a window to her death. But in the sequel, Happy Death Day to You, Tree ends up transported to another dimension and meets another version of Laurie who has no murderous tendencies whatsoever. In an ironic twist, Laurie is now being targeted by the killer herself, and spends the movie teaming up with Tree and her boyfriend Carter to take them down. While this version of Laurie technically never switched sides because she was never a villain to begin with, it was still a fun, playful way for Christopher Landon to remix the conventions of the first movie. Number 8, Gabriel, The Prophecy 3, The Ascent. In 1995's fantasy horror The Prophecy and its sequel, the primary antagonist is the Archangel Gabriel, who wants to fuel a war between heaven and hell, while played with scenery-devouring relish by the great Christopher Walken. But in threequel, The Prophecy 3: The Ascent, Gabriel, who was turned into a human at the end of the second film, returns in a heroic capacity, serving as a protector to Danielle, the only person capable of killing the movie's genocidal angelic villain. By helping our hero and repenting for his prior villainy, the ending sees Gabriel have his angelic status and divine powers fully restored, having learned a massive lesson about, not being a literally biblical a-hole. Though the Prophecy franchise limped on for 2 more entries, we sadly never got to see what became of Gabriel next, as the evidently dwindling budgets presumably couldn't afford Christopher Walken's day rate anymore. Number 7, Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw 3D. Texas Chainsaw 3D made the bold, if arguably misguided, decision to try and reinvent focal killer Leatherface into an anti-hero. Though Leatherface spends a good deal of the film cleaving relatively innocent folk into with reckless abandon, in the latter half of the movie he trains his focus, that is his chainsaw, on the corrupt cops who massacred his family decades earlier. This culminates in Lethy teaming up with the movie's protagonist Heather, who is also revealed to be his cousin. Leatherface kills most of the dirty cops, saves his cuz, and lives to fight another day. The end. This fundamental change to Leatherface's persona didn't exactly hit with most fans, and while it certainly didn't help that the movie as a whole was, awful, it ultimately felt like the wrong franchise to try and switch things up so radically. To the surprise of no one, both subsequent Texas Chainsaw movies kept Leatherface a card-carrying villain, and quite rightly so. Number 6, The Puppets, Puppet Master 4. In the first and second Puppet Master movies, puppeteer André Toulon's precious puppets are brought to life by an Egyptian spell, inducing them to embark on murderous rampages. But the franchise took something of an unexpected detour after this point, with prequel Puppet Master 3 Toulon's Revenge detailing the puppet's tragic origin story, where they and Toulon are terrorised by Nazis. And so the fourth and fifth Puppet Master films, the latter of which was intended to be the series' final movie, ditched any hint of the puppets' villainy whatsoever, presenting them as out-and-out heroes as they face off against demonic entities, because why the hell not? If you've only seen the first couple of Puppet Master movies, or have just a cursory knowledge of the franchise, you probably assumed that the puppets were murderous antagonists the entire time. But alas, not quite. Number 5, the T-800 Terminator 2 Judgment Day. We can't mention the Terminator franchise without at least a few asterisks. Firstly, only the original Terminator can be even remotely considered a horror film. And secondly, the T-800 we meet in Terminator 2 is a different version to the one encountered in the original movie. All the same, for all intents and purposes, the big hook of T2 is that Arnie's murderous cyborg is actually a force for good this time. After relentlessly pursuing Sarah Connor in The Terminator, this second T-800 is reprogrammed by the human resistance and sent back through time to protect Sarah's young son John, the future leader of the resistance, from another killer machine, the T-1000. For those lucky enough to watch T2 without knowing the twist beforehand, it was surely a stunning revelation. But even if not, it remains the gold standard for a sequel flipping the original script. Number 4, The Horde, Glass. M. Night Shyamalan's Split made an absolutely terrifying antagonist out of Kevin Wendell Crumb, aka The Horde, a man living with dissociative identity disorder who manifests 24 distinct personalities, one of which is the animalistic and supernaturally strong The Beast. Sequel Glass saw the Horde return to do battle with both David Dunn, aka the Overseer, and the puppet master who helped cause Kevin's condition, Elijah Price, aka Mr. Glass. And though he spends most of the movie acting as a fierce, brutal entity, at film's end, the Beast is tamed by one of his prior kidnap victims, Casey Cook, who seems to be the only person capable of bringing the Kevin personality into the light. Yet Kevin gets just a few peaceful moments with Casey before he's shot and killed by a SWAT sniper who is working at the behest of the movie's real villain, Dr. Ellie Staple, the leader of a cabal attempting to suppress the existence of superhumans. In the very least, Kevin got to die as his harmless true self, rather than the monster he'd become. Number 3, Jason Voorhees, Freddy vs. Jason. Jason Voorhees is of course one of the most iconic villains in the history of the horror genre, with hundreds of kills to his name over the course of the franchise. And while most fans expected Freddy vs. Jason to not really pick a side in the long-awaited clash between horror icons, the audience was very clearly nudged to root for Jason as the lesser of the two evils. After all, the plot is driven forward by Freddy Krueger's unhinged scheme to regain power on Earth by taking the guise of Jason's mother and manipulating him into killing teens to bring about renewed fear in himself. So to be clear, Jason still kills his fair share of innocent people in this movie, yet he's ultimately a mere pawn in Freddy's plan. More to the point, he ends up helping the remaining survivors kill Freddy at the end by stabbing him with his own bladed glove. You'd never call Jason a squeaky clean hero, but when pitted against something much worse, he was clearly the one to root for. Number 2, B, The Babysitter 2 Killer Queen. Given that the first Babysitter movie revolved around a 12-year-old boy, Cole, discovering that his babysitter B is actually the leader of a satanic cult that wants to kill him, there didn't seem to be any possibility of redemption for her. But sequel The Babysitter Killer Queen swung for the fences with a late film reveal that B actually made her initial deal with the devil to save the life of the child she babysat before Cole, Phoebe. More to the point, B has been pulling the strings from behind the scenes the whole time, conspiring to bring Cole and Phoebe together so they can defeat the cult, before she then finally sacrifices herself to ensure the cult's permanent demise. That was unexpected. It's certainly a contrived fleshing out of the first movie's events and therefore didn't go down well with everyone who enjoyed the original, but Samara Weaving sure did try her damnedest to sell B's shocking allegiance shift. Number 1, John Kramer, Saw X. Saw X is an interesting one, because while nobody's going to come away from the movie calling Jigsaw Killer John Kramer a hero, much like Freddy vs. Jason, he's presented in a more sympathetic light as the lesser of the film's monsters. Set between the first two Saw movies, Saw X softens Kramer's character somewhat by having him be the victim of shyster doctors who prey upon the terminally ill with the promise of a miracle cure. The doctor leading the outfit, Cecilia, is a sociopathic con artist who becomes the target of Kramer's next game alongside her complicit underlings. Cecilia is ultimately repugnant enough to make the audience easily pull for Kramer, especially once she goes full mask-off psycho and puts a young boy, Carlos, in one of Kramer's own traps alongside him. Kramer is a sick puppy himself, no matter his own twisted logic for testing humanity's will to live. But Cecilia is totally beyond the pale. A clever screenwriting flourish to make fans inexplicably cheer on the very villain around which the Saw franchise revolves.